45 years ago, at $50, the cup would have begun its descent to its current low point at $4 in the early 1990s. From there, it begins to rise again, almost reaching the top of the cup in 2011. Not preaching, but consolidating. Now, we're at $44, very close to the 50 level, where there is no resistance. But according to technical charts, you would add the difference between the two levels, roughly $46 to the top, and your next upside target would be $48. Isn't it insane? I'm talking triple digits, $96 to $100. Silver is a material that might be anticipated. Technical analysis, historical context, and a fundamental change in global finance are all parts of the silver market's current narrative. Looking at the silver price chart over the past 45 years, a cup and handle pattern has formed. It started at $50 in 1980, dropped to $4 in the early 1990s, and is now slowly making its way back up to the 50 level. If silver were to break through the 50 level, there would be no resistance above, setting the next target near $100. Adding to this, the US government's decision to reclassify silver as a critical mineral is laying the groundwork for a generational shift, which would involve countries like India, Russia, China, and Saudi Arabia. There's no denying the importance of this moment. Andy Schectman, CEO of Miles Franklin and a precious metals analyst, has long maintained that silver is the world's most undervalued asset. He notes that institutional traders in the US are starting to take notice, but the general public is still lagging behind. And this disparity is what causes asymmetric opportunity, small potential for negative consequences, and huge potential for positive ones. Here are some excerpts from Andy Schectman's interview. Before we get into the rest of the discussion, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that bell icon to get timely updates. Premiums, supply shortages, and soaring demand from both governments and private institutions are making it seem like the rules of the game are changing. If gold has already been woven into the monetary system, then silver could be the next domino to fall. Trust in fiat is weakening, and metals are pouring into COMEX, so it's only a matter of time until silver's role is fully repriced. Thank you and enjoy the video. The quantity of silver entering the COMEX from a technical perspective is really staggering. Here we have a 45-year cup and handle formation, which is as powerful as any in technical analysis, particularly when it comes to mature markets like silver. Basically, the cup started at $50 in 1980, dropped to around $4 in the early 90s, and started to rise again around 2011. Not preaching, but consolidating. Now we're at roughly $44, very close to the top of the cup, and we're almost ready to move back up. Here's how it works. Once you break through the 50 level, which is the lip of the cup, first of all, there is no resistance whatsoever. However, according to technical charts, you take the "isn't it insane?" I'm talking triple digits, $96 to $100. Silver is something one could expect at some point, and then when you realize that the government reclassified silver now as a critical element, a critical mineral, they've put a floor under the price of silver. And so I think, all of the talk over the last 6-7 months, and I said no. From the get-go, this is not about tariffs. Never. It was a ruse to bring it all back. This is reshoring. This is understanding that the biggest money in the world understands the significance of things like silver. The biggest traders here in the United States, the institutional traders, when they start to pay attention, when they start to accumulate, we should all pay attention. We've been talking about this on a central bank level for a few years now, about the deliveries into COMEX, for a few years now, about the accumulation by India, by Russia, by Saudi Arabia, by China flying around the world and buying Dory when they're the second largest producer in the world, sending it back to China. For refining, why would the second largest producer of silver in the world find it necessary to fly to Latin America to buy concentrate and directly from a miner, pay double what the West will ship it back for refining? If it were just this, this rock that hasn't done anything forever. And I don't know. Silver right now feels to me like gold did about a year ago when it was right in the $2,100–2,200 range. And it kept trying to break out and would, consolidate and try to break out, come down, consolidate in a long period of consolidation, and then broke through. And it hasn't looked back. I would say that's about where silver is right now. I look at it as the most undervalued asset in the world. And now, evidently, the United States finds it significant enough to call it critical. I think there are very few opportunities asymmetrically where you have such low downside and such high upside. Being asymmetrical for an asset like this, it's a generation. So I think the drivers are big money waking up. Now, you could argue that the public is not even part of this rally yet. What happens when they collectively wake up? This is being driven by people at the highest of levels before the public catches on, which is another contrarian indicator. So, yeah, I think what's driving gold and silver is that silver is finally catching up. Gold is being rewoven into the monetary fabric of the globe. And thankfully, someone in this administration, I think, grabbed President Trump and said, if we don't do this, we will forever regret it. This is our last opportunity to bring some of this home, because the world is moving away from treasuries and dollars and paper promises, and then you add on to it sanctions and tariffs after 4 years of nightmarish domestic on foreign policy prior to this administration. You could argue a system that is fully based on trust has squandered the majority of it. And then, look, I would vote for President Trump again, but I don't agree with the way he is antagonizing even his allies like India, as an example, throwing on 50% tariffs and many of the other countries in the European Union and Canada. Maybe there's something bigger at play, which we've talked about a lot, but I think it's just beginning, quite frankly. Look, you have a comment coming out of Goldman Sachs a couple weeks ago that if the market even thinks that the Fed has lost independence, well, okay, the firing Elisa Cook, who's going to go in there. It'll be a Trump bobo. You look at Stephen Muir and replacing the last point, Fed official who left, who is the author of the Mar-a-Lago Accord. The Fed has lost independence. And mind you, this is nothing new. You go back through history, you'll see this happening with multiple presidents. But it's like they give you crumbs and the crumbs. Well, we told you that this could happen. And now you have, banks talking as high as $6,600, $4,000 being base case for most of these banks. Look, you put silver at 5,000, like Goldman says, and you divide it by 70, which would be, way higher than its average for the past 100 years, and still 10 times higher than it's coming out of the ground. You're talking 75 silver or thereabouts. So, to me, this is just beginning, Elijah. Honestly, I do believe that, and I think this is the time that most of us have been talking about as, typically following suit way early, but I'd rather be months and even years early than 60-second plate. When the switch flips on this, you have, as we've talked about at length, 11 states already that recognize precious metals, many of which is specifically gold and silver. Eagles has legal tender, and the US Mint can't keep up. So the primary distributors who buy all of the large shipments from the mints, when the mints run out of product, The primary distributors now become the de facto market makers, and it's a function of supply and or demand. Spreads are very high right now because the price is getting higher. I remember, just a few years ago, like even with 1,500 gold, you're talking 30,000 for a tube of silver eagles. Now they're almost 80,000. And so cost of inventory is getting higher margin. Our premiums are going higher. And there's volatility that we expect to see based upon what we have seen for a very long time. But maybe the rules are being rewritten. Maybe things are changing. Maybe the government, for once, is going to let the price go higher instead of stepping on it through levered futures contracts. Maybe this has a lot to do with all the metal coming back. The reclassification of as strategic or critical. All of the talk of gold being woven into the back end of the treasury market. He who has the gold makes the rules. Says Trump, there are a lot of reasons to think that maybe this time is different now. Usually when you hear that you should run this time is different. But I will say it does feel different. Ultimately, we'll have to see how it plays out. But I don't ever remember in all of my years doing this. Elijah, which is almost 36, seeing a market with this continual strength. And every time it's hit, it just comes right back. That is a characteristic. That is certainly new. And it feels like, they're just going to let it go much higher. In particular, with gold, making the revaluation at some point much easier and increasing the value of the holdings that they have. And if they really are going to revalue it, like a lot of people talk about, myself included, James Rickards, Mike Maloney, the Federal Reserve Senator Lummis from Wyoming. Keep on going on Judy Shelton. If they do, starting from a much higher peak or plateau from much higher base would be beneficial to them. And when you see banks saying, okay, now it's 4, now it's